Welcome back to the Budding Author Podcast with me, your host, Simon Ward. Today, we're going to be talking to Beth Tabler. And Beth is editor of GDM. Right then. Hi, Beth. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me.
It's my pleasure. It's my pleasure. Lots of books behind you. Is that a real screen? Is that a real book?
Oh yeah. This is my second library. These are my pretty books. I have my pretty books, and then I have my other book collection downstairs. I have about I could probably show you.
Oh, yeah, you have one or two. It's like you're in a bookstore.
Yeah. If I had take the living room and turn it into like a library type atmosphere, I would be happy. Can't have enough.
We just had a little chat before we came on air about sort of the state of the world and that sort of stuff. But first of all, I'd like to hear your story of how you sort of got involved in writing and ultimately how you became editor of GDM.
Well, it's interesting. So, I don't know, about 6 years ago, I started a website called Before We Go Blog. And originally, it was a list site, like a bucket list site, because I love doing bucket list items. And so I thought, oh, that might be fun to, record them or for posterity, put pictures up for family and stuff. And then I've always been a big reader, obviously. And I thought, well, I could do some book reviews and stuff too, because I have bucket lists for books as well, like reading the canonical, 50 best fantasies or Times 100 best novels, So as I started doing that, I noticed it was more books and less other stuff. And it kind of just transformed into a book review site. And I saw a challenge of doing 30 days in November or December, posting content. I'm like, well, I could do that. I could do 30 days of content. And then I did 30 days of content for January, and then I did 30 days of content.
That's intense. That is intense.
So I just started rolling with it, I'm so excited to get 5 people to come to my website. And at the same time, I was on Twitter and I was getting involved in the, self-publishing community. I love propping up writers. I love finding connections for people, finding that special book that brings 2 people together. I love that. I love being the intermediary. And I was writing reviews for about 2 years. I had about 500 done, give or take.
That's a lot of reading, that is.
Yeah, I read a lot of books. And then I got noticed, one of my reviews, from GDM, Grimdark magazine. And I was asked to basically audition, read a book, and write a review for it and see if my style and stuff lined up with theirs.
Yeah.
And I did. And it was Justin Call's first book. And it went really well. And at the same time, I noticed that I love to do interviewing. And so I just, on a lark, started pitching authors. And my whole thought behind that was, the worst that they could say is no.
Yeah.
It doesn't harm anything to want to promote somebody.
Yeah.
And I did research, and I think I put out some pretty good interviews, some stinkers, but generally some pretty good interviews. And I started doing more of that for GDM and Before We Go Blog. And that kind of took off as well. So I became sort of the interviewer for Grimdark magazine. I became the go-to person.
Yeah.
And I was working a lot with Adrian. Adrian is the EIC of Grimdark magazine.
Yeah.
About, issues. And he asked me, hey, would you like to guest edit? Be the editor. And I was
can I just give you this?
Yeah, he's like, under him, of course, because I didn't know how to put everything together. But I went out and pitched for stories from different authors, and I had to sell us, and and I put it together, and it went really well, and I very much enjoyed it. And then, I don't know, about 6 months later, Adrian asked me if I wanted to take over the magazine. Now, Grimdark magazine is actually getting rather large. in terms of the things that we cover. So we have
Yeah.
the magazine side, which is I'm the head of, and then we have the web content, which is obviously different. And then we're
Yeah.
actually we publish now too. And
Yeah.
Adrian is in charge of publishing. And we all work together, but we're kind of separate. I have my own team underneath me for the magazine stuff, and I work with them and so on and so forth. And so I became the editor of Grimdark magazine, and I've done last 2.5 years.
That's awesome. The Grimdark magazine. So when you're saying you're pitching authors, how does that work exactly? Explain that to me.
So let's say this particular issue. This issue is the 10th anniversary issue.
Yeah.
It was a big deal, and I was working on it for 6 months. I sent an email to Scott Lynch, who wrote The Lies of Loch Lamora.
Yeah.
And I said, hey, we've got this big issue coming up. Would you be interested in writing a story for it for either Loch Lamora or something new? Because he had been working on stuff and hadn't really put out a lot of stuff for a little while. And he was super thrilled because, the audience of Grimdark magazine is pretty much his readers. Like that's his people.
I mean, is it like a commission? Is it? Yeah.
Yeah, we pay.
Yeah.
Yeah, we pay. We want to pay more. But we are completely paid for through Patreon. So we have to get people to subscribe to the magazine and stuff, and it's a slow process. We're getting better, more stories in each issue, so on and so forth. So I sent him an email. He agreed. I set a time frame. And then I'm like, well, okay, if he's going to write this story, then I have this other story that I found a reprint for that I like, and I'm going to email that author and see if it's available. And so now, and they say yes. Well, now I have 2 stories that kind of work together.
So you're sort of grabbing bits from each area.
Yeah,
and then all of the as Grimdark suggests, that's dark fantasy, I would say.
Well,
short stories.
Originally, Grimdark was like Warhammer 40K type stuff, but really it's become the realm of morally ambiguous characters, like the gray character, the one that does the right thing for the wrong reasons or the wrong thing for the right reasons, and there is like a truth in that to the human condition. So it's stories that feel realer. They don't follow the Lord of the Rings, nothing wrong with that.
More realistic fantasy, if that makes sense.
Yeah, like with a reaction, with a personality, they have more latitude. The characters have more choice because they're not being pigeonholed into a, I don't know, the many different tropes that are in fantasy. So it could be anything, but it has to have morally ambiguous gray character. Yeah. And it could be fantasy or horror or cyberpunk, science fiction. I've done 2 science fiction issues. I've done 2 horror issues, and I've done an issue that's specialized in storytelling from Southeast Asia, because there's a lot of really amazing storytellers coming out of Southeast Asia, and the storytelling style is different. It's just they have different legends, different ways of telling stories, and it's incredible. And Gaurav Mohanty, who is actually, I have his book right behind me. Who is the sweetest man ever, wrote Sons of Darkness.
Yeah,
and it's pretty. It's pretty.
Lots of effort gone into that.
And it's based on legends from Southeast Asia, but it's a grimdark novel.
Yeah.
And it's one of the first that have become really popular over here.
Yeah. So, what kind of readership does that have then?
For Grimdark magazine, we have about 2 million hits a year, give or take. And
Only a few then.
Huh?
Only a few then.
Yeah, that's the magazine. The actual magazine, the website's 2 million. The actual magazine, it varies. You know, it varies. It depends on which kind of issue it is. We've had issues that haven't done super well, and we've had issues that have gone gangbusters like this. The last issue that we did, I was actually number one. We were number one in anthologies.
Yeah.
On Amazon for a while.
That's getting there.
Yeah.
We did say before we came on air about sort of gaining traction with there's so many books out there. That's how do we gain traction without spending a fortune on adverts?
That's actually a real good thing to talk about, because I think the publishing environment is changing. Self-publishing is becoming much bigger deal, especially like in general. If you look at the TikTok books, self-published TikTok books can go and have gone nuts and have 500,000 copies sold and stuff just based on TikTok following. And
when you say TikTok books, you mean books that have been promoted through TikTok?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And that changes, the dynamic of like the big five. You've got this like dark horse of TikTok books coming up, and then you've got the self-publishing fantasy blog off. My Before We Go blog has been a part of that as a blogger team for 4 years now, I think. And what are you familiar with that contest at all?
Not really, no.
Okay. Mark Lawrence, the author Mark Lawrence, put out there that he's going 10 years ago, take 10 blogs and 300 self-published books. And those 10 blogs were going to judge those 300 self-published books. And they were going to winnow them down until they have a winner. Now, there's a bunch of things that go into that. Luck of where you're, the style of fantasy or whatever that you write under goes to whatever kind of team. My team tends to like a lot of darker fantasy because, but there are teams that like cozy fantasy and stuff. Yeah. And that's been going on for the last 10 years. And Before We Go blog is one of the 10 teams. And their winners do really well.
Yeah.
They have
careers. How do I get my book into that?
You, in May, they'll come a day. Okay. In May, there will come a day. If you follow Mark Lawrence on Twitter.
Yeah, I followed him earlier, actually. That's
Yeah, you follow him on Twitter. He'll put out the details of when you can put your hat in the ring, basically. And last year, the contest filled up in 46 minutes. So you got to be.
So you got to be pretty sharp on it then.
Yeah, you got to be pushing that button, ready to go, because all over the world, people are trying to get into the contest. So.
So obviously it's a very big deal then.
Yeah, it is. And
my frustration, so I say gaining traction is very difficult. All the reviews I've had on my books have been very positive, but I've just not enough.
You gotta the environment's changing. Like you gotta be out there marketing yourself. Like you authors are turning into like their own business. They've turned themselves into their own business and market themselves. And it's a skill set that, not every person who writes really well knows to do or knows how to do. And so really great books get overlooked just because it's such a huge pile of books
it's getting spotted, isn't it? And the thing is, I think when people do pick up my book, it's is it the right person that's gonna share that like crazy to sort of get traction? So that's a difficult game, isn't it? I think probably on the marketing side of things, I've been pretty poor on that, to be honest. I think.
Well, you've got, this is great. What you're doing right here is great.
Well, I started this show at the start of the year because I was aware that I hadn't really got much of a network of contacts. So I wanted to improve my writing from talking to different authors, which I've done on here, and I've picked up some superb advice from different authors and people like yourself, and that's helped my writing. Dylan West introduced me to Scriberfile, which I found really good as well. I haven't actually put my own stuff into that yet. I've been building up points because you get points for critiquing others. So I'm building up points before I sort of put my work in there.
Oh, I see how it's run. Okay, well, yeah, that I could see how that would be great.
Yeah, it's good. I think it'd be interesting to see how people respond to my writing in that. Whether they might be as critical as I am, perhaps, because I'm quite a harsh critic of myself. So I'm
Me too.
I've got to be happy before I'll send it anywhere. Really, I've got sort of a tight group. My wife and I've got one remaining member of my writing group that sort of wants to look at everything I do. And then I've got a retired editor who's sort of keen to have a look. So I've got some stuff with her. I'm writing a young adult series. So she's just got episode 2 that she's working on at the moment. She's had a quick read through and said it's okay, but she's going to go through. She reads through it first and then goes through every line thereafter, sort of thing. So I'm quite excited about that. That's something I want to get to TV. That would be it's one of these things to sort of improve traction, isn't it? And it's difficult. I have a personal appearance coming up,
Nice.
October the 24th. I think this will be going out just before that, I think. And it's at the local library, Dudley Library, here in the UK. And so that'll be interesting, chatting about my books, taking a few copies along, and hopefully get a few people there. But it's.
Did you go to Worldcon?
Worldcon? No, what's this? What's Worldcon? Tell me about Worldcon.
Worldcon is the biggest author convention, I think, in the world, and it's put on every year in a different city in different country. And it was in Glasgow this last year.
Yeah.
And it is
a UK one then, by the sound of it.
It is a perfect place if you have the means to, you go to different panels, you can schmooze with other authors, there's different writing groups, there's coffee walks, you can have one-on-one conversations with well-known authors. It's really fantastic. I for the first time, so I've been to two Worldcons, and this last Worldcon, I was part of a panel for the first time. I've done lots of panels, but it's the first time I've been in a convention setting, like a physical convention setting, and doing a panel.
Yeah. How did that go? The panel work on that?
It was fun. It was exciting. Yeah, it was on creating covers, like dynamic covers for magazines. Because for the Grimdark magazine covers, I work with an amazing artist, and we, I'll read through the stories and I have an idea of what I want the cover to look like.
Yeah.
And I'll, talk to our actual artist named Carlos, who's amazing, and he'll start putting it together, and then him and I work together to get it created. And I make sure that it works with typography and then the logo, and make sure that everything's placed correctly. But that's what the panel is on.
Yeah. The so cover design is that's a tricky one,
It's
because
very important.
everybody falls in love with their own cover, but whether it sort of strikes a chord with the people when they're flicking through, and it's there's so many impressions
Mm-hmm.
that are flicking by somebody, and it's how it can just grab you, I think.
I think one of the most important things with cover design now is that it looks good as a like 1 inch by 1 inch. Because you got to think about it when you're on Amazon and you're scrolling looking for a book, your cover
Yeah.
needs to shrink down well so
Yeah.
that the person can be interested.
It's shrunk down now. You say this one.
Yeah, I think it'll look very blue. It'll look very blue. It could be fine. Yeah, it'll shrink down well to get interest, and then they can click on it. And then from there, got to have a real, good typography, real catching image, and no AI.
I was gonna say AI is sort of
Don't do AI.
starting to be starting to cause some troubles, isn't it? Artificial intelligence, and particularly in cover design. I had somebody do a cover design for me, and I raised some questions on it, and eventually I got it out of them that they basically just put it into AI. And it's like, hang on, I was happy with the cover, but it's just disappointing when people introduce themselves as an artist, and then they're just going and doing what I could do by just putting a description into Canva or whatever.
Midjourney. Yeah.
Or Midjourney, yeah, and
Yeah, and if they do that, if an artist this is the way that I look at it. If an artist has an AI cover, did they use AI to write their book too? I don't know.
Yeah.
And being that I'm scrolling looking for something to read, I can tell it's an AI cover. I'm just gonna skip it.
Yeah.
And if somebody finds out, let's say you're in the writing community, like on Twitter, say somebody finds out that you have an AI cover, you will get raked over the coals, and rightly so. Like people will boycott your book. It's a very big deal.
Yeah,
because there's a lot of artists and stuff that are in that community as well.
It's about looking after each other, isn't it?
Yeah. Both Adrian and I, our moms are professional artists.
Yeah.
And it hit home for us. Like, we have it contractually about no AI. And then we have it AI for our cover work and no AI for our stories.
When we say, the thing is, the blurred lines of AI, because I don't consider this to be AI, but I use Pro Writing Aid.
Yeah, that's not quite the same thing.
Because Pro Writing Aid is sort of suggesting corrections to sentences and correcting grammar. And
that's not the same thing. Like, that's fine.
But strictly speaking, what you could say that is that's part AI, isn't it?
I think that correcting grammar is an acceptable use of AI. It's not even AI. It's the way that I think about AI is it's going out and it's parsing massive amounts of text and stories. And then you can tell it, say, I would like a story written in the voice of Mark Lawrence. And it can spit out a story that you could tweak as a writer and make it your own, and you have Mark Lawrence's voice, style, everything. All you did was tweak it. That's AI.
And I agree. That's definitely where the line is crossed. But how can people spot that? That's
there are
spot, isn't it?
There are engines now that we put stories through that spot patterns. I mean, it's not 100%. It's a new emerging problem, but it spots patterns, word choice that's common use with AI, and it will flag it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a rabbit hole we could go crazy with there. With the stories that you're looking at bringing on, what would you say in all the stories that you're reading is the biggest issues you see with stories, the biggest problems, the biggest mistakes that people make with the writing? What would you say?
I think, you know, we just did a big submission, which turned out to be a lot more work than we thought it was going to be. We got 250 stories, and we had to first go through them for AI. So taking the AI stories out.
Yeah.
The first level of problem immediately that we look at is how somebody views Grimdark. Because often we get a lot of stories that are basically torture porn.
Okay.
And like the movie Saw, it's torture porn, or it has gratuitous sexual assault, killing babies, and it's a lot of things. It's like lack of understanding of what we're trying to find in these stories. It's lack of writerly skill, I think, also. So we, at the very top, we cut those off because nobody wants to read torture. Well, I mean, some people want to read torture porn, but I don't want torture porn in our magazine. Like, it's just not. We're better than that. And then dialogue is a huge problem, as we have talked about. Stilted dialogue just destroys a story. Just destroys it. And the thing with short stories is that you have to be very, very tight. And it has to be, you are talking about a moment in time. You can't go on these, 50-page Stephen King-esque, descriptors of a doorknob. You don't have time. You don't have words for that. You don't have length for that. You need to pick your words and pick them very, very specifically. And you can really tell somebody who is very good at writing short stories and somebody who maybe doesn't quite have the skill there yet in writing short stories, because it's a skill just like writing long novels.
But I recently spoke with Laura Frost, and she's done a lot with short stories. And I thought, have I sort of missed a trick in some ways? Because short story writing, you can gain some traction through competition entries and that sort of stuff to try and promote your work. So I've sort of thought, well, hang on, I should get back to that. And I looked at a short story I'd written, and I'd written it about 3 years ago, and I realised how awful it was, which I think is testament. I think it's testament. You've improved as a writer when you look at some work from a couple of years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, and you realise how bad it is. So I did some work on this, and I thought the submission was 3,000 words, and when I'd sort of updated it and sort of corrected the POV errors, it was about 3,200 words. And so then I had to sort of tighten it down to get it below 3,000. And then when I went into the submission details for this short story, it said 2,500. So I had to take another 500 words out of this story. And it's a good lesson in reading the instructions, obviously. But it's a good lesson in sort of tightening up a story.
Yeah, and, brevity.
Taking out the unnecessary elements. And there's like one particular element within that story I just took out completely in the end, because it wasn't getting to the end. And the way I finished the story, the guy that appears at the very end, I don't actually name him. So I leave that for the audience to sort of guess who that was right at the very end, which obviously in a novel you'd sort of go into a much more detail and the backstory behind how that sort of worked. But in a short story, sort of putting putting that sort of little bit of mystery in, so people have got questions to ask thereafter. I think it's difficult to tie everything up in a short story in 2,500 words, isn't it?
It is. Yeah, I mean, some of the best short stories I've read don't tie everything up.
No.
They don't leave it so ambiguous that you have no idea what's going on, but they leave enough ambiguity in them to keep you thinking about the short story, months and months later. Really successful ones. I think, novellas are very similar also. Like
novellas, you're up to about 20,000 words in a novella, aren't you?
No, novellas go up to, I think, 80.
80?
I think so. Yeah. I have to look, but I think the novellas 100 page. I think novellas are 100 pages.
Oh, 80 pages. I was thinking about 1,000 words. I meant.
Oh no, I think they're about 100 pages.
Yeah.
and it's the same thing. You got to write very tightly. There is a great author. Have you read any of P. Fenderson Clark, P.D. Gillet Clark's work?
No.
Oh, he is remarkable. He is a remarkable writer, and he writes really tight fantasy that has a lot of myth in it.
Yeah.
And he's very good at novellas and very good at short stories.
That must be really tricky, because with fantasy, sort of word building and that world building in that short time frame, it must be really difficult.
Mm-hmm.
Particularly for people like me to understand, because I'm a bit thick when I read. I need to it needs to be easy for me. We have kind of run out of time. I just want to get your thoughts just very quickly on what do you think of Ben Elton? Have you read much Ben Elton? You've not read Ben Elton?
I have not.
That's this book is Blind Faith. Is one you'd quite like, I think. It's like futuristic, dystopian world sort of thing.
Here, let me write this down.
You've probably heard of
I've read. Yeah, I've read the first like 15 books of that series.
yeah. My brother got sort of really into that, and I read a few of them, and I thought, oh, this is a bit full of steam.
Saucy, a little bit saucy.
A little bit saucy. But my books have got some sauce in them as well. But that's all good, isn't it? Right then, we have sort of run out of time. But Beth, thank you very much. It's been great to talk to you. You've sent me a copy of the Grimdark magazine, which I appreciate, and I'm going to get into that, and I shall give you some feedback from wonderful. That. It's going to be superb. I'll put a link in the description so people can know where to get a copy of that and get in touch with Beth.
Yes,
brilliant.
Thank you for having me.
Great talking to you. Thank you.